Corruption is a pervasive issue that affects countries around the globe, hindering economic development, undermining the rule of law, and eroding public trust in institutions. In this article, we delve into the 20 most corrupt countries in the world, examining the factors contributing to their high levels of corruption and the impact on their societies. Number 1. Somalia. Somalia has consistently ranked as one of the most corrupt countries in the world. The ongoing civil war, lack of a central government, and widespread poverty create an environment ripe for corruption. Government officials and warlords often exploit the country's resources for personal gain, leaving the population to suffer. Number 2. South Sudan. South Sudan, the world's youngest nation, struggles with corruption at all levels of government. The country's vast oil wealth has been a significant factor in fueling corruption, with revenues often siphoned off by government officials instead of being used for public services and infrastructure development. Number 3. Syria. Years of civil war in Syria have devastated the country and created fertile ground for corruption. Both the government and opposition groups have been accused of corruption, including bribery, embezzlement, and looting. The lack of accountability and transparency exacerbates the problem, making it difficult to combat corruption effectively. Number 4. Yemen. Yemen faces a complex web of corruption, exacerbated by ongoing conflict and humanitarian crises. Government officials, military leaders, and even aid organizations have been implicated in corrupt practices, diverting funds and resources meant for the struggling population. Number 5. Venezuela. Venezuela's economic collapse and political instability have been accompanied by rampant corruption. The government's control over key industries, such as oil, has led to widespread embezzlement and bribery. The lack of transparency and accountability has made it difficult to address the root causes of corruption. Number 6. Sudan. Sudan has a long history of corruption, particularly under the regime of Omar al-Bashir. Despite recent political changes, corruption remains deeply entrenched in the country's institutions. Government officials and military leaders continue to exploit public resources for personal gain, hindering economic development and social progress. Number 7. Guinea-Bissau. Guinea-Bissau is plagued by corruption, driven by its role as a transit point for drug trafficking. Government officials and security forces are often implicated in the illicit trade, undermining the rule of law and fueling corruption at all levels of society. Number 8. North Korea. North Korea is one of the most secretive and corrupt countries in the world. The regime's control over all aspects of life, combined with a lack of transparency, allows corruption to flourish. Bribery and embezzlement are common among government officials, further impoverishing the already suffering population. Number 9. Equatorial Guinea. Equatorial Guinea is rich in natural resources, particularly oil, yet its population remains impoverished due to widespread corruption. The ruling elite, including President Teodoro Obiang Bosogo, have been accused of embezzling billions of dollars, leaving little for public services and infrastructure. Number 10. Libya. Libya's political instability and ongoing conflict have created an environment ripe for corruption. Government officials and militias often exploit the country's resources for personal gain, while the lack of accountability and transparency makes it difficult to combat corruption effectively. Number 11. Haiti. Haiti has a long history of political instability and corruption. Government officials and public servants are frequently implicated in bribery and embezzlement, diverting much-needed resources from essential services and development projects. The country's vulnerability to natural disasters further exacerbates the problem, as aid funds are often misappropriated. Number 12. Iraq. Iraq's political system is plagued by corruption, with government officials and politicians often engaging in bribery, embezzlement, and nepotism. The country's vast oil wealth has been a significant factor in fueling corruption, as revenues are frequently diverted for personal gain rather than public benefit. Number 13. Afghanistan. Afghanistan's ongoing conflict and instability have created a fertile ground for corruption. Government officials, military leaders, and local warlords are often involved in corrupt practices, including bribery, embezzlement, and drug trafficking. The lack of accountability and transparency further compounds the problem. Number 14. Burundi. Burundi is one of the poorest countries in the world, and corruption is a significant barrier to its development. Government officials and public servants are frequently implicated in bribery and embezzlement, diverting resources from essential services and development projects. Number 15. Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe's political and economic instability has been accompanied by widespread corruption. Government officials and politicians are often involved in bribery, embezzlement, and misappropriation of public funds. The lack of accountability and transparency makes it difficult to combat corruption effectively. Number 16. Democratic Republic of the Congo. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is rich in natural resources, yet its population remains impoverished due to widespread corruption. Government officials, military leaders, and business elites frequently exploit the country's resources for personal gain. While the lack of accountability and transparency makes it difficult to combat corruption effectively. Number 17. Chad. Chad is one of the most corrupt countries in Africa, with government officials and public servants frequently implicated in bribery and embezzlement. The country's vast oil wealth has been a significant factor in fueling corruption, as revenues are often diverted for personal gain rather than public benefit. Number 18. Angola. Angola is rich in natural resources, particularly oil, yet its population remains impoverished due to widespread corruption. Government officials and business elites frequently exploit the country's resources for personal gain, while the lack of accountability and transparency makes it difficult to combat corruption effectively. Number 19. Eritrea. Eritrea's authoritarian regime and lack of transparency create a fertile ground for corruption. Government officials and military leaders often exploit public resources for personal gain, while the lack of accountability and transparency makes it difficult to combat corruption effectively. Number 20. Central African Republic. The Central African Republic is plagued by political instability and conflict, creating an environment ripe for corruption. Government officials, military leaders, and rebel groups often exploit the country's resources for personal gain. While the lack of accountability and transparency makes it difficult to combat corruption effectively. Addressing corruption, a global challenge. Tackling corruption requires a multifaceted approach, including strengthening institutions, promoting transparency, and ensuring accountability. Here are some strategies that can help address corruption globally. Strengthening institutions. Strong, independent institutions are crucial for combating corruption. This includes a robust judiciary, effective law enforcement agencies, and independent anti-corruption bodies. These institutions need adequate resources and political support to carry out their mandates effectively. Promoting transparency. Transparency is key to preventing corruption. Governments should adopt open data policies, publish budgets and spending reports, and ensure that public procurement processes are transparent and competitive. Civil society and the media also play a crucial role in promoting transparency by holding public officials accountable. Ensuring accountability. Accountability mechanisms, such as audits, oversight bodies, and whistleblower protections, are essential for deterring and addressing corruption. Public officials must be held accountable for their actions, and there should be consequences for corrupt behavior. Engaging civil society. Civil society organizations and the media play a critical role in the fight against corruption. They can raise awareness, advocate for policy changes, and hold public officials accountable. Governments should create an enabling environment for civil society to operate freely and effectively. International cooperation. Corruption is a global problem that requires international cooperation. Countries must work together to combat money laundering, recover stolen assets, and prosecute corrupt individuals. International organizations, such as the United Nations and the World Bank, can provide support and coordination in these efforts. Conclusion. Corruption remains a significant challenge for many countries around the world. The 20 countries highlighted in this article represent some of the most severe cases, but corruption exists in various forms and degrees globally. Addressing corruption requires a comprehensive approach that includes strengthening institutions, promoting transparency, ensuring accountability, engaging civil society, and fostering international cooperation. By working together, we can create a more transparent, accountable, and just world.